So you've got that Raspberry Pi 1 Model B, maybe gathering dust somewhere, a real piece of computing history. And you've probably got a bunch of classic game ROMs, too.
Mm-hmm.
The big question is, can you actually marry those two things? Can you get some decent retro gaming out of that little old Pi? Well, that's what we're diving into today.
Exactly. We're really focusing in what's the absolute best way, the best OS, to turn that specific Pi, the Model B, into a retro console, especially if you've already got your games ready.
Okay, but let's set expectations here. The Pi 1 was revolutionary, absolutely. But compared to today's tech, it's old.
Yeah.
We're talking a 700 megahertz single core chip and what was it, 256 or 512 megs of RAM.
That's right, depending on the revision.
So dreaming of like N64 or PlayStation on this, probably not going to happen smoothly. We need to think more a bit 16-bit era, right?
Yeah.
NES, Genesis, Super Nintendo, that kind of thing.
Precisely. That's the sweet spot. Trying to push much beyond that, you're just going to run into performance brick walls. The hardware just isn't there for the more demanding stuff. So we'll stick to where it can really shine. And on the software side, the operating system side, there are a few main players you hear about for turning a Pi into a retro machine. We're going to look closely at RetroPie, Recalbox, Laka, and Batasera.
Right, those are the big names. Okay, let's kick things off with maybe the most well-known one, RetroPie.
Okay, so RetroPie. It's interesting because it's actually built on top of Raspberry Pi OS, the standard Pi operating system.
Right, so it's got that foundation.
Exactly. And then it layers Emulation Station on top. That's the graphical front end, the menu system you see. And crucially, it uses RetroArch as a back end for a lot of the emulators. But it can also use standalone emulators, too.
And they have specific versions just for the Pi 1, yeah?
They do. That's really important. You need to grab the image labeled for Pi 1 or Pi 0. Compatibility-wise, it's huge. Supports like over 50 systems.
Wow, okay. So massive potential for that ROM collection.
Definitely. Now, performance on the Pi 1, it's generally good for those 8-bit and 16-bit systems we mentioned. NES, SNES, Genesis, Master System, mostly fine. Yeah, you might find some really demanding SNES games, maybe ones with special chips. Could stutter a bit.
Yeah.
But overall, very playable. And getting it installed is pretty easy now.
How so?
The Raspberry Pi Imager tool. It actually lists RetroPie directly in the OS choices now. So you just pick your SD card, and write. Super simple.
Ah, that's handy. Takes out a lot of the old manual steps. Okay, installation sounds good. What about getting your games, your ROMs onto it?
Good question. RetroPie gives you a few ways. Probably the most common is using a USB stick.
Right.
You format the stick, FAT32 or X8 works. Then, right on the root level, you create a folder called RetroPie. All lowercase.
RetroPie.
Plug that empty folder USB stick into the Pi while it's running RetroPie. Wait a little bit. It'll automatically create a whole bunch of subfolders inside that RetroPie folder on the stick.
Oh, it builds the structure for you.
Exactly. Including a ROMs folder, and inside that, folders for all the different consoles, Stells, Mega Drive, whatever.
Clever. So then you take the stick back to your computer.
Yep. Pull it out, plug it into your PC, go into RetroPieROMs, find the right system folder, like SNERS, and just copy your SNES ROM files into there.
Makes sense.
Do that for all your systems. Then eject the USB safely, plug it back into the Pi. It'll automatically copy the ROMs from the USB stick over to the Pi's SD card.
And then they just show up.
Almost. You usually need to restart Emulation Station. There's an option in the main menu. Press Start, go to Quit, then restart Emulation Station. After that, boom, your game should be listed.
Okay, that sounds manageable. What about other ways? Network?
Yep, network shares are the other main way. If your Pi and PC are on the same network, you can use SFTP or Samba. Usually on Windows, you can just type RetroPie into File Explorer,
Oh, right.
and it should connect. Or you might need the Pi's IP address. Then you'll see a ROM share, and you can drag and drop files directly over the network. Then restart Emulation Station again.
Okay, two solid options there. Let's move on to Recalbox. What's the story there?
Recalbox is often seen as maybe a bit more polished or user-friendly out of the box. It also uses Emulation Station, so the interface looks kind of similar. And yes, it definitely supports the Pi 1.
And performance-wise?
Yeah.
Compared to RetroPie on the Pi 1?
Pretty comparable from what we've seen. For those core 8 and 16-bit systems, you likely won't notice a huge difference. Installation is the same idea, flash an image file.
So where does it really differ? You said user-friendly.
Yeah, particularly with ROM transfers, I think. Their Samba share setup is often just plug and play. Put the Pi on the network, and it just appears under network in your Windows File Explorer. Makes dragging and dropping super easy.
Okay. Less fiddling, potentially.
Potentially. And they also have a web interface. You can go to the Pi's IP address in your browser and manage things, even upload ROMs directly through the web page.
Interesting. So maybe a smoother experience for managing games day to day.
Could be, yeah, for some users.
Okay, next up, Laka. This one sounds a bit different.
It is, yeah. Laka takes a different approach. It's a very, very lightweight Linux distribution that's built around RetroArch.
So it's not Raspberry Pi OS underneath.
No, it's its own minimal Linux, designed purely to run RetroArch efficiently. The interface isn't Emulation Station either. It uses RetroArch's own menu, which looks a bit like the PlayStation 3 XMB, the cross-media bar.
Okay, and compatible with Pi 1.
Yep, there are Pi 1 builds available.
Now, lightweight sounds good for old hardware like the Pi 1. Does that translate to better performance?
Potentially. Because there's less OS overhead, less stuff running in the background, you might squeeze out a few extra frames per second, maybe make a borderline game run a bit smoother. It's not guaranteed, but it's plausible.
Worth considering then. How's installation and ROM transfer?
Installation is image flashing again, though sometimes it's offered via NOOBS2, which some people find easier. For ROMs, it's similar methods. Network shares, Samba, or SFTP are supported. Or you can use a USB drive, just copy your ROMs into a folder named ROMs on the stick.
Okay, standard options there too. Right, last one on the list, Batocera. What's its angle? Often hear plug and play associated with it.
That's definitely their focus. Ease of use works on a lot of different hardware, including the Pi 1. Performance, again, for the 816-bit stuff on a Pi 1, it's going to be in the same ballpark as the others. Adequate.
Installation, same deal?
Pretty much. Download the image, flash it to the SD card. Where it offers convenience again is maybe ROM transfer. It has the standard Samba network share, easy enough. It also has a built-in file manager. If you plug a keyboard in and press F1, you get like a desktop file manager right there on the Pi. So you could plug in a USB stick with ROMs and copy them over directly using that interface.
Oh, okay. That's kind of neat. A bit different.
Yeah, gives you another option if network shares aren't working for you or you prefer that direct interaction.
All right, we've looked at the main four. RetroPie, Recalbox, Laka, Batocera. Now, the big moment. For our listener, Pi 1 Model B in hand, existing ROM collection ready. What's the recommendation? Which one should they go for?
Okay. Considering the specific hardware, the Pi 1's limitations, and wanting reliability plus flexibility with existing games, based on everything, the strongest recommendation really points towards RetroPie.
RetroPie. Okay, let's unpack that. Why RetroPie specifically for the Pi 1 challenge?
Well, few key things stack up. First, and maybe most importantly for older hardware, is the community. RetroPie's community is huge, massive.
And that helps how?
If you hit a snag, trying to get a specific game running well, or wondering about optimal settings for the Pi 1, chances are someone else has already asked that question and found an answer. There are tons of forum posts, guides, wikis, specifically about optimizing RetroPie in the Pi 1.
Right, troubleshooting becomes way easier.
Exactly. That support network is invaluable when you're pushing limits. Plus, that community contributes things like pre-configured settings, compatibility lists for older emulator versions needed for the Pi 1, stuff you might not find easily elsewhere.
That makes a huge amount of sense. What else puts RetroPie ahead here?
The sheer breadth of emulators it supports. While the Pi 1 can't run everything well, having access to more emulators gives you the best chance of finding one that works efficiently for a particular system or even a specific game on that hardware. More options to experiment with.
Maximizing what the hardware can do.
Precisely. And finally, the ROM transfer options we talked about. Having both the easy USB method and the network share options is flexible. It caters to however you prefer to manage your files, making it straightforward to get that existing collection loaded up.
Okay, solid reasoning. RetroPie it is. So let's assume our listener is sold. Walk us through getting RetroPie onto that Pi 1.
Right. First step, head over to the official RetroPie website, that's retropie.org.uk, then find the download section. You need to grab the image specifically for the Raspberry Pi 1.0. It'll be a file ending in .img.gz.
Got it. Pi 1 image from the official site. What else?
You'll need the Raspberry Pi Imager tool. If you don't have it already, you can get it from raspberrypi.com/software. It's free. Runs on Windows, Mac, Linux.
Okay, Imager tool downloaded. SD card ready.
Yep, grab your micro SD card. At least 8 GB is a good idea, maybe 16 GB or more if you have a lot of games. Pop it into your computer's card reader.
All right.
Now, open the Raspberry Pi Imager. First, click Choose OS. Scroll down, find Emulation and Game OS. Click that, and you should see RetroPie listed. Make sure you pick the one that says Raspberry Pi 1.0.
Okay, selected the OS.
Next, click Choose Storage. Select your micro SD cards from the list. Please double check it's the right one. You don't want to wipe the wrong drive.
Good warning. Okay, checked.
Then just click Write. It'll ask for confirmation that it'll download the image if needed, flash it, and verify it. Takes a few minutes.
And once that's done,
Safely eject the SD card from your computer, put it into the microSD slot on your Raspberry Pi 1. Now connect everything up, HDMI to your TV or monitor, a USB keyboard for initial setup, and finally the power cable.
and boot it up.
Yep, plug in the power, it'll start booting. First time, it'll do a quick automatic thing where it resizes the file system to use the whole SD card. Then, pretty quickly, it should pop up with a screen asking you to configure an input device.
Ah, controller setup.
Right. Hold down any button on your connected controller or keyboard, and it'll guide you through mapping the buttons up, down, A, B, start, select, etc. Just follow the prompts.
Okay, so RetroPie is installed, controllers mapped. Now, the games. Let's revisit that USB stick method for getting ROMs on there.
Sure. So format your USB stick first, FA32 or XAT.
Okay.
Create that empty folder on the root called RetroPie, all lowercase.
Right, RetroPie.
Plug that stick into the running Pi. Give it, 30 seconds, maybe a minute. You need time to see the stick and write all the system folders inside that RetroPie folder.
So it creates RetroPie and then one's ROMs, etc. inside.
Exactly. Once you think it's had enough time, take the USB stick out, plug it into your computer. Now navigate into RetroPie on the USB stick. Find the folder for the console you want to add games for, say NES. Copy your NES ROM files, NES files usually, into that NES folder. Repeat for SNES, Genesis, whatever systems you have.
Copy all the games into the right folders on the USB stick.
Correct. When you're done, eject the USB stick safely from your computer. Plug it back into the Raspberry Pi.
And wait again.
Yeah, give it time again. Now it's copying the ROMs from the USB stick to the Pi's internal SD card. The Pi's LED might flash a bit while it's doing this. How long depends on how many games you added.
Okay, be patient. Then what?
Once you think it's done copying, you need to tell the front-end emulation station to rescan for new games. Press the Start button on your controller, go to the Quit menu, and choose Restart Emulation Station.
Restart emulation station.
Yep. When it loads back up, you should now see entries for the systems you added ROMs for, and your games should be listed inside.
Brilliant. Sounds pretty straightforward. And the network method, again, quickly.
Right, network share. Make sure Pi and PC are on the same network. Open File Explorer on Windows. In the address bar, type RetroPie and press Enter.
Right.
If you're lucky, it connects straight away. If not, you'll need to find your Pi's IP address. You can usually find this somewhere in the RetroPie settings menu. Then type followed by the IP address, like 192.168.1.55 or whatever it is.
Okay, connect via name or IP.
Once connected, you'll see shared folders. Open the ROM share. Inside, you'll see all the system folders again, etc.
Same structure.
Exactly. Just drag and drop your ROM files from your PC directly into the correct folders over the network.
Simpler if the network connection works easily.
Definitely can be. Once you've copied everything, again, you need to restart Emulation Station from the Quit menu for the games to show up.
Got it. Okay, ROMs transferred. Now, performance? The Pi 1 is old. Any tricks to squeeze a bit more out of it? Optimize things?
Yeah, this is where the tinkering comes in. One thing people often mention is overclocking.
Uh-oh. Sounds risky.
It needs caution. You can usually find the option in the RetroPie setup script. Look under Configuration or Tools for Overclock. You can bump the CPU speed up a bit.
What?
But it generates more heat, might need little heat sinks on the chips. It can potentially reduce the lifespan of the Pi. If you push it too far, it becomes unstable and crashes. So if you try it, start with very small increases, test thoroughly. Maybe don't do it at all if you want maximum reliability.
Okay. Overclocking. Proceed with extreme caution. Or maybe just avoid it. What else? Software tweaks?
Definitely. Inside RetroPie, for many systems, you can actually choose which emulator core to use.
Oh.
Yeah, so for SNES, for example, there might be several different SNES emulators available. One might be more accurate but slower, another might be less accurate but faster. On the Pi 1, choosing a faster emulator, even if slightly less accurate, might be necessary for some games. So experiment with the choices in the RetroArch settings or the Run Command menu that pops up briefly when you launch a game.
Experiment with emulator cores. Good tip. Anything else?
ROM versions matter too, especially for arcade games via MAME. MAME emulators are very picky about needing ROM sets that match their specific version. For the Pi 1, you'll be using older MAME versions like MAME 2000 or MAME 2003. You need to find ROM sets specifically designed for those versions. Using newer MAME ROMs just won't work or will run terribly.
So get the right MAME ROM set for the emulator version. That's key.
Crucial for MAME. And one final thing, graphical effects. RetroArch has options for things like video smoothing, shaders, which try to mimic old CRT screen effects. These look nice, but they use processing power.
Power the Pi 1 doesn't have to spare.
Exactly. So if games are running slow, go into the RetroArch settings, usually accessible via Hotkey plus X in-game, and turn off any shaders or video smoothing filters. That can free up valuable resources.
Disable the fancy stuff for more speed. Makes sense. Some really practical tips there. Okay, let's wrap this up. Quick summary.
Yeah, so turning that old Raspberry Pi 1 Model B into a retro gaming machine. Absolutely doable, especially for those fantastic 8-bit and 16-bit classics. We looked at the options, and for someone with existing ROMs wanting reliability and support on this specific hardware, RetroPie seems like the strongest recommendation.
Right. Because of that huge community support, the wide range of emulators to try, and the flexible ways to get your games onto it.
Exactly. It gives you the best toolkit for tackling the limitations of the Pi 1.
It really does feel like a bit of a journey, doesn't it? Getting these old classics running on this pioneering hardware, it's about experimentation, maybe a little frustration, but ultimately pretty rewarding when it works.
Definitely a rewarding project.
So for you listening, maybe the real question now is, once you get it set up, what's the very first classic game you're going to fire up on that revitalized Pi 1? Time to dust it off and find out.